Hello, and thank you for joining us for a pre-concert lecture. This is the first classics concert of our 2020-21 season. It's been quite a year. The last time our orchestra performed on the Maryland Theater stage was last February, so it's been nearly a year since we have all been together. And the time in between has been a time of sadness and anxiety. It's a time of reflection, and now it's a time of hope and renewal. And what better way to begin our classic season than with a celebration of life, of the seasons, of time that fades and renews. A time of reflection and a time of celebration. I am accompanied by some very extraordinary people who will collaborate with the members of the string section of our orchestra in performances of David Ludwig's Seasons Lost for 2 violins and string orchestra, and the wonderful Vivaldi's masterpiece, perhaps, his 4 Seasons. Bella Hristova is one of the most extraordinary performers of her generation. She is a delight to encounter as an artist and as a person. She and her husband are joining us. David Ludwig is the composer of the first work on our program, Seasons Lost. And we're also joined by our concertmaster, Robert Martin, who will perform as the other violin soloist in David Ludwig's piece, and also perform as concertmaster in the Vivaldi 4 Seasons. So let me welcome them right now to the screen, and we have lots to talk about. Yeah. I grew up listening to my mother's poetry. She was a poet, a working poet, and she would often read or recite her work to me. I was often the first set of ears that got to hear her work. And I know that when I would comment on what I had heard, she would say, well, that's very interesting. I'm not sure I had that in mind when I wrote it, but that's an interesting idea. I'm glad to know that you feel that way about it, or you hear that. Often I would talk about rhythms or images, relationships. And of course, poetry is the closest to music in terms of literary output, it seems to me. And to have the privilege of speaking to a composer about their own work, to let you know how I encounter it, and to also receive, more importantly, I think, the feedback from you and the insight from you about the works. So what a privilege it is, David, to have this opportunity to talk to you about your extraordinary work. Seasons Lost, it's a timely work. I know it was written in 2012, so it's, gosh, almost a decade old at this point. And I'm sure that you have moved in new directions as a composer and as a musician since then. So I'm asking you to think back a little bit and to hear it with new ears, obviously, when you'll hear Bella and Rob play the solo parts, but also for us as listeners to just give us a little insight into the motivation for the work and how you put it together.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to work together again and with the Maryland Symphony. So thanks for having me. And the piece it is amazing. It's been about a decade. Few things have happened since then, since writing it. But for me, the piece is still very close because the message is still very important to me. It's a message of thinking about our climate. I grew up, actually, I spent a lot of time in Maryland growing up as a kid. In the summers, we would go down to the Chesapeake Bay. And I grew up in Pennsylvania and then New York City, so an East Coaster. and grew up with some pretty dramatic changes in the seasons. And those changes have kind of smoothed out over time, I think, in a noticeable way. And so the piece is about, is in a way its own Four Seasons piece, like the Vivaldi, a response to Vivaldi and other pieces about Four Seasons, but also reflecting on climate change. And so that's why it's Seasons Lost. It's about reflecting on a time when we had this from nature and perhaps we're more connected to nature. So each movement definitely tries to embody the feeling of the individual seasons, beginning with winter and ending with fall.
I think it's different from the Vivaldi, which begins with the spring and ends with winter.
Right.
And I think it's very telling that you chose that. Also, along with the titles of the seasons are Latin words meaning one, two, third, fourth, or trio or quartet. And I know that the organization that the listeners will encounter starts out with the players in unison for the first, and it continues, then a duo, then they begin to encounter other solo players in the principal players in the group, in trios, and then in the fourth in quartet arrangements. I also I just, the idea of the bleakness of winter, the way that it starts so just on one tone, there is something to what Vivaldi had, but it seems a lot more stark, especially because you begin that way. Is there a reason why you decided to start with winter rather than spring?
Yeah, well, Vivaldi, I bet he had warmer winters than we did in Pennsylvania. So in Italy, I wanted to start out of real simplicity, and so for me, thinking about the numbers, as you incredibly point out and have clearly gotten deep into the piece, the idea of a year passing and things blooming and coming apart. So beginning all in unity, in unisons, and the number one, unum, and then as you say, the two soloists play duets with lots of seconds, and then the third movement has lots of thirds, and then fourths if you're a music person or into music theory. But I wanted to think about the full cycle of life, actually, that out of winter is born spring, which then leads to summer. So in a way, it's a little bit like Shakespeare's Seven Ages of Man, this kind of thing. The idea of a full life cycle beginning in the winter and ending on its precipice, such that you could start the piece again and just continually play it as a cycle.
Very cool. The second movement, of course, you use the Lydian scales all over the place. That's a scale which has the raised fourth. And I'm just wondering, because all of the gestures are pretty much upward, which of course gives us the idea of growth and, the rebirth and blossoming and coming to life, which is spectacular. But there is that raised fourth, which is also, of course, to some of us, the devil's triad or whatever it is, So I'm wondering if there's a little bit of whether we're talking about ebullient rising or sinister rising or something, a little bit of both, something more frenetic or so. And as a conductor, I want to know whether we're talking about joy or whether there's a little twist in it, or you're using the mode because of just it's a sound you really like. It opens up different relationships harmonically, and it gives us a sense of, maybe looking back to older ways of harmonic organization as well as new ways.
Wow.
Is that just too heady for?
No, it's just awesome. I don't work with a lot of conductors who are, so fastidious and knowledgeable about all this. So, well, can I try something on the piano?
Sure, but okay.
Can I demonstrate something on the piano?
That'd be great.
Great.
Yeah.
So the Lydian mode is one that's close to my heart, and when
Ah,
George Crumb uses it, I think he calls it the God mode or something like that.
cool.
Frenetic is a good word, but also this kind of unhindered blossoming of sound, in the spring. So thinking about the overtone series, we'll see if I do this right, and so forth. We're sitting at the piano now. This note, the F sharp, that raised fourth you were talking about, is part of the overtone series. So it's a very piquant note, but it's one that we hear in the scale. And so the more that music is connected to the overtone series. So what's that? The overtone series, a little bit like, I think about when you throw a rock or pebble into the water and the ripples that come out of it. Whenever we play a note on an instrument, there are many other notes actually sounding, some of which we might hear, some which we don't necessarily perceive up front, but it's just the nature of sound and resonance. And so the closer that the music that music adheres to this overtone series, the more resonant it is. It's just physics. So the Lydian mode, as opposed to a major or minor scale, is a very special way of organizing notes. It's a very special scale because it has, to me at least, a little more resonance than, and so I think about life actually, and blossoming and resonance and nature, especially in connecting the music to the Lydian mode. I'd like to thank my assistant,
And chief editor.
editor in chief. Yeah, but
That's spectacular. Oh,
nice.
thank you. I mean,
Yeah, I love how you use that color in the second
yeah.
movement.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And it's great to hear you talk about it. I get this feeling of lifting. I get this feeling of kind of floating when I hear that that Lydian color. And I was imagining when I don't know, listening to it and playing it, some sort of winged creature or something.
Great.
But I can also imagine the growth of whatever type of plant life or that I could imagine. Yeah, it's really, really, really my favorite, I think, movement of the piece. Yeah.
And I love that it connects again to the Vivaldi a little bit, because of course in the spring, he even in his sonnet talks about the fronds and the boughs of the trees and such growing and life burgeoning, basically.
Reawakening.
So yes, yeah, absolutely. Third movement. My goodness, this is a sad song to me. That sighing third, the falling third, so poignant, heartbreaking. In Vivaldi, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's a bit contrasted with Your Summer, I think. Although there's fear of bad weather and things like that in Vivaldi, but here with you, there is a sense of melancholy. I know that you talk about jazz trios and smoky, smoke. I'm trying to remember how you explained it, but yeah, in the trios, with a jazzy feel to it. It's definitely I think it's a very personal statement, it seems to me. And if you want to elaborate a little bit more on that and how you put that together. That sighing gesture goes all the way back to Baroque and earlier in terms of rhetoric, musical rhetoric, obviously. It has been, and one thinks of all the Bach cantatas and things like that, where you have that sighing third, just the fall of the sentiment.
Yeah, it's such a great observation again. So the summer movement is the slow movement of the piece. And I really want to evoke the kind of summers I grew up with and the ones I still think about and going to summer festivals, wherever they are. We're still, things are still very much alive, but thinking about that kind of haze in the air, the quality of the air in the summer, moisture, the
The
humidity.
humidity.
Yeah, as the violinist.
Yes.
You know, and the smokiness of bonfires and you know, just that kind of haze that's over the whole feeling of the summer, that almost dreamy quality actually that summer can have. So absolutely about the rhetoric of it, that feeling of sighing, of release, of thoughtfulness, those moments that we have alone in the summer when we're walking on the grass or in the woods, moments of introspection, but also the instruments are always kind of sliding around to lots of glissandos.
It's the humidity.
It's
Yes.
so, you know, ways of making it so that we're listening to the music almost like through a veil, the feeling of summer, how we have that feeling of everything's under a veil. So that's kind of what I'm going for there, that everything is these kind of pastel colors behind some sort of screen of some kind.
Spectacular. And you do this so well. You use obviously what we would, I don't know if we'll call them modern anymore, but I mean the opportunities for glissandos and you know, just the writing, the notation for the players is advanced to create these wonderful veils of humidity, shall we say. Just spectacular. The last movement, again, this super energetic, reminds me in some ways of Vivaldi's Winter in that, I know, excuse me, of Autumn. So Autumn is the last movement. Sorry, Vivaldi's Autumn in the chase. It seems like everyone's chasing each other on this. The last movement of the Vivaldi is about hunters and chasing their little poor fox or whatever they're chasing. This is a little bit more fierce. There is a moment of stasis, of reflection again, maybe a throwback, a remembrance of summer or something else from before, but and also a suggestion of what's coming up as well. But if you could talk to us a little bit about that. This is the most, I would say, in many ways, acrobatic for the players. It's the most virtuosic part of it.
It
ends with a bang.
Yeah, it does end with a bang.
Yeah.
You know, the closing of the year, basically, you know, so I'm thinking about winter maybe as being our January, you know, where we are now in the fall ending, you know, to end the year. So I'm thinking very much about the wind and trees rustling and the leaves blowing across the ground. So sometimes when I write it, it comes off very visually, and this is one of those pieces. It is very acrobatic. It's what you would say in music, it's a rondo form. So it's you know, like a circle. It begins and then goes over here and then comes back and then goes over here and then comes back to the beginning and then goes over here. And so thinking about this symbolism of that also to end with a circle, but in a piece that's all about circles and cycles, and renewal and life and into death. And so you know, the year ends with a bang, with windstorms and gusts, and you know, in the middle of it, we kind of hold on and get an opportunity, just as you say, to look back, and there are quotations from the other movements, but we then we end with a bang.
Well, it's been a joy. I can imagine, Bella, and I want you now, Bella and Rob, to now please speak about learning the piece. Bella, this is the first time that you are performing your husband's work, which is exciting. And Rob, our cherished concertmaster, we're so happy that he agreed to join you, to join you, Bella. But Bella, can you speak to the piece as a player encountering this work? even though you know the composer very well and can probably say, what the heck were you thinking? Or what did you mean by? Or whatever you might say. Or this is amazing.
Yeah.
But
well, actually, so it's this actually was very helpful, I think, for my interpretation of it. I knew the piece when David was writing it. I got to know it, and I heard one of the first performances of it, of course, but I didn't know it in the depth that I know it now because I hadn't played it until now. So learning it, I approach it like I would any other piece. I look at the part, then the score, and then I just sort of start figuring out first the technical problems, or they're not problems, I don't mean problems, the technical aspects one by one, so that, you know, that needs to be taken care of so that you can get the music across, so the technique isn't noticed, but it's there. I love the piece, and I'm grateful, Rob, that you agreed to do it together. And yeah, so
I wouldn't miss it. I wouldn't miss it.
I would say the most unique part of playing David's music is probably practicing it at home. I would say I don't do it any differently in performance, because all music that I play, you know, I put the same amount of energy and passion into it. But practicing the music at home, I guess I get self-conscious doing that, depending on what David is doing and how much he can hear me. Before COVID, I would usually just practice his music when he wasn't home. But now we're home all the time, so we've also come to terms with that. But I do occasionally ask him, what were you, not necessarily what were you thinking, but
what were you thinking?
You know, yeah.
That's so funny. I do the same thing with my wife. My wife is also a violinist, and if there's something that I don't want her to hear me play yet,
yeah,
that I haven't had a chance to work it out, I do it while she's out.
Totally.
Yeah.
Bella and I have worked together quite a bit, and I wrote a concerto for her that she's played all over the world, and a concert piece. But this is a little different because it's not a piece that I originally wrote for Bella, but as she mentioned earlier, she is my editor-in-chief. So
I am.
you know, I always go to her for her opinions, for her reactions. It's incredibly valuable and important for me. And I'm so fortunate to be married to and live with an extraordinary musician to give me unfiltered or mildly filtered feedback.
well, we know that this will be an authoritative performance because of that connection, and it will inspire all of us as well in the accompanying orchestra. Rob, you and Bella have not worked together, at least in this piece before. I don't know if you know each other from before, but
I don't know.
what has it been like, you know, in COVID times, sort of practicing in a vacuum? Now, I do want to say, I want to give you big congratulations, because of course you serve in our Army Band, and you have been for several years the concertmaster of the orchestra, and you have been newly promoted for your wonderful work. So congratulations to you for that, and thank you for your service to our country, keeping the standard of great music always high in that institution. What's it like, you know, both as a concertmaster of the Maryland Symphony and preparing as a soloist? Different things, different roles in the same concert for you.
Yeah, very different. When it comes to preparing for this piece, I've been preparing for whatever I imagine that Bella might do with it, since we haven't actually met or played it for each other, played any of the parts of this piece together. And so that way, when we do get together, I'll have, you know, some degree of flexibility. So I've played this piece already, you know, X number of different ways. And so then when we're on stage or when we meet for rehearsal, I'll be able to hopefully immediately adjust to my surroundings, and in particular, whatever she's doing.
Well, likewise, I think,
Yeah.
our preparation as two soloists is not complete until we meet together. And so I'm also keeping flexibility. And I think once we put it together, then it becomes our own interpretation instead of us just fitting into, I think, what the other wants or likes to do. So I think that's one of the magical aspects of live performance, but also working with others in a concerto where there are two soloists. And I think I'm really looking forward to it.
Yes. And I'm going to ask Rob to help us segue into the Vivaldi, because you now step into the role as concertmaster of the orchestra that accompanies this. And in a way, very much like the Ludwig, you are equal partners to the soloist in that creating the world in which the soloist exists and speaks the poetry of Vivaldi now. But in your preparation as concertmaster, you also prepare the parts that all the string principals then take and pretty much go the same route you do in terms of bowings and markings. Bella has ideas about bowings, articulations for the Vivaldi that might be something that are new ideas for you or not, but your responsibility is to make sure that the string parts are marked according to her ideas and wishes. And then, of course, we all get together and talk about it and have rehearsal and make whatever changes and additions we need to do. But can you talk about moving into the concertmaster position in a concert with the Maryland Symphony?
I think both roles as soloist and as concertmaster, or as playing in the section of an orchestra, are just different structures, just like any other musical situation, where there are certain levels of freedom that you have and certain restraints that you have, and you have to be as creative as you possibly can within those, whatever those confines are. So like a totally free musical situation would just be me playing by myself in an empty hall doing a free improvisation, but now here we have Bella soloing and me soloing with her, and it's David's piece that he wrote, so there's a structure on the page that we have to stick to a certain degree, and then but as a soloist I have maybe a little bit more freedom to make decisions that are just individual to me, whereas the decisions I'm making as concertmaster, I'm thinking about what's going to sound the best when we're all doing the same thing. So what part of the bow am I playing in? How much vibrato am I using? All of these little decisions are being made not just for myself, but I'm thinking of, okay, we all have to do the same thing, and what's going to sound good. And then when we have a soloist up there, how are we complementing what she's doing and enhancing what she's doing and playing off of that?
Yeah, it's a really important and remarkable position, the concertmaster. It can make or break a performance, honestly, and the relationship you have with the conductor, whose job it is to sort of harness all the forces and shape, make sure that the overall shape is what the composer has notated, and my understanding of that and our understanding of what that might mean is made all the easier with a concertmaster who's flexible but also pretty much on the same page, moving forward, and is as prepared as you always are, and caring as you always are. So we're in good hands with you, Rob. So I'm excited about that. And now I'd like to talk to Bella about the Vivaldi, because Vivaldi actually in his writing, and anyone can please, if you have other observations about the Vivaldi, please chime in. But Bella, what is it like to recreate a human being from 300 years ago? A voice, I should say, a voice, someone telling us of their experience of existence, of, he wrote some sonnets to accompany, so we have some, which we'll put up for our audience before each movement so that you can sort of see his ideas, what motivated him, although we don't know whether he wrote them before or after the actual composition, but at least we get some idea that things that sound like bird calls are actually bird calls. Things that sound like a dog barking are actually the dog barking. Repeated notes and rapid scales are meant to evoke wind or rain or pizzicato, rain, those kinds of things. But what's it like to explore this remarkable voice, who was a great violinist in his own time and wrote for extraordinary young women in his own time as well? Give us some insight.
Yes, well, I love Vivaldi's Four Seasons. It's one of the probably the most well-known and recognized pieces of violin literature. And actually what's so unique about it is that he gave us sonnets and so much guidance as to what part of the music corresponds exactly to what character. Now, some of it is obvious, like the stormy weather or the birds, but there are places where, for example, the villager's complaint, if I didn't have that note there in my music, I may play it differently. It's a sad part, but when you add the complaint element, I think your playing does change, and there are maybe some exaggerations that one can do to get those characters more across. Another example I think of is the drunkard when he's trying to walk home, maybe after a party, or the beast when the beast takes flight in autumn in the hunt. So these are all images that we rarely get from a composer, especially a composer that lived 300 years ago. Oftentimes we have to guess what was on his mind when he was writing, he or she, when they were writing the music. So the Vivaldi is really unique in that. I think the piece itself, I think all music is chamber music, but you really feel that in the Four Seasons because there's so much interaction between the solo part and then there's solo lines within the orchestra and then the orchestra itself. So to me, I'm listening to everybody else first before I hear myself, and I think a performance of it becomes really special that way because everybody's in a way playing solo parts and blending with other. It feels like chamber music on stage.
For sure. This will definitely feel that way because we're only allowed a total of, I think, 25 people on stage at any time at this time in COVID land on the Maryland Theater stage. So we'll have a smaller orchestra, a smaller string section than we normally have. But it will still evoke the magic of both works. I'm sure of it. I know that we're all eager to join you for our upcoming concert. It's been a pleasure speaking to all three of you. I'm looking forward to actually seeing you in person and working with you. David, I have still some more questions about the work, and I know that your presence will make the performance even more special for us and give us confidence that we really are speaking we are conversing with our audience in the way that you have intended. And Bella, for you to be able to be the spokesperson for Vivaldi, someone from 300 years ago, to bring that to life and to have us come with you on that journey is something that we all are looking forward to. So thank you very much. I appreciate your presence and looking forward to our concert together.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.